This pursuit of truth encourages dialogue, understanding, and zeal for sharing the gospel message. And this is what Catholic Studies and also the core curriculum does here at Seton Hall University. This is the legacy of Archbishop Myers that we are celebrating today, a legacy which the establishing and flourishing of Catholic Studies and the core curriculum at Seton Hall proudly represent. It is not surprising that Archbishop Myers championed these particular academic programs during his tenure as the chair of the Board of Regents and Board of Trustees at Seton Hall University. I reflected on his motto as Archbishop. His motto was Mysterium Ecclesia Luceat, which means let the mystery of the church shine forth. Through the opportunities that Catholic Studies and the core present, the mystery of the church has become an increasingly powerful beacon across the globe, illuminating minds and hearts of our students at this Catholic/diocesan university. In his homily at the Mass, during which he was installed as the 5th Archbishop of Newark, Archbishop Myers noted that through the transformation to which we are called, quote, our everyday actions will take on deeper meaning and human culture itself will be purified, enriched, and ennobled. The Archbishop called on the laity, like myself, to fulfill its integral role in the elevation of human culture. Catholic Studies and the core at Seton Hall University continually strive to inspire and empower students to meet this challenge. I've had the opportunity to talk with Archbishop Myers on several occasions, even when we were designing the Department of Catholic Studies and the core curriculum. I will never forget the first time I met with him at a conference on Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta. The Archbishop had a special connection with Mother Teresa. Archbishop held Mother in very high esteem, following her example and her charisma. They had a bond, the same vision and mission, and the thirst to serve Christ. And it is because of Archbishop Myers, actually, that we have the Sisters of Mother Teresa here in Newark. As Cardinal Tobin said during his homily when Archbishop Myers passed, quote, I entrust him, Archbishop Myers, to the loving arms of our Blessed Mother Mary, and I pray that our Lord grant him peace. He is probably in good company of our Mother, unquote. In 2013, Archbishop Myers presented the apostolic blessing of Pope Francis, that Pope Francis, had bestowed upon the newly established Department of Catholic Studies. Catholic Studies Archbishop Myers Lecture series that we are celebrating today focuses on law, society, and faith, and was established on the occasion of the foundation of the Department of Catholic Studies, and also in celebration of the apostolic blessing. And during the first anniversary, when we celebrated the Department of Catholic Studies, we have our first speaker who gave the lecture that Father Danny is giving today for us. So this is the history of Archbishop Myers, his legacy at Seton Hall University, and why we celebrate his memory and his legacy. Now I would invite my dear colleague and friend, Father Jerry Buonapane, who is a professor at the Department of Chemistry, but also he teaches for Catholic Studies and the core. Father Jerry, besides being a priest in the Archdiocese of Newark, is also the minister to the priest community. So to introduce our very distinguished speaker, Father Jerry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Merzaku. And, you know, I just applaud certainly all of the wonderful work that comes out of our Department of Catholic Studies. And it is these kinds of presentations and lectures, and today I'm sure a wonderful opportunity for all of us. Yeah, it is a great honor, that we continue this beautiful lecture series in honor of dear Archbishop John Joseph Myers. And we've had so many great presentations in the past and certainly again today. But I do come to you to introduce Father Daniel Franklin Pilario. Father Pilario is a member of the Congregation of Missions. He's a Vincentian priest and wonderful. And he, right this time in this year of 2021-22, he is a visiting professor at St. John's University in New York, and he's the Vincentian Chair of Social Justice there. Father Danny earned his Ph.D. in theology and religious studies, and also his Doctor of Sacred Theology, all from the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. He is, though, and I believe he'll be returning back to his home in the Philippines, but he is professor and dean of St. Vincent's School of Theology at Adamson University there in the Philippines. Father Danny, from his dissertation, he's published it as Back to the Rough Grounds of Praxis. This title, Exploring Theological Method with Pierre Bourdieu in 2005. And Father Danny was awarded the best research in humanities based on that work. He has many interests and lots of projects, publications. His focus is on Asian theologies, justice and liberation, enculturation, political theology, Catholic social teaching, human rights, and ecology. Today, Father will speak to us on this topic of rethinking Asian Christianities. And I do want to certainly welcome, as Dr. Marzocco, all of you, we welcome Father Danny here. It's wonderful, and it's great to see a couple of priest friends, Father David Sisson, Father Ed Jackson, who are here, who I believe were students with Father Danny. I just want to say one thing. As a weekend assistant at a parish nearby in Livingston, my pastor, Monsignor Bob Furman, would say, where would we be without our Filipino community? So such a wonderful presence and you just make these parishes come alive so well. So Father Danny, thank you for your work. Thank you for your fidelity and how you just put your work on paper, you put it into action. So welcome so very much here.
Thank you very much, Father Jerry, for the kind words of introduction. Thank you for the warm welcome and hospitality to Seton Hall University. I also would like to thank Professor Dr. Inez Morzaco, the Director of Catholic Studies at the Seton Hall University, for inviting me to give this year's lecture in honor of Archbishop John Myers, who has promoted research on Catholic mission, not only in the US, but in the whole world. This is my first time in Seton Hall. We actually didn't know if we are going to arrive on time, but thanks be to God, we're here. I haven't met Archbishop Myers myself. I did not know about him. We're a little bit far away from here. But when I came here, I feel some sorts of affinity because my former colleagues and students in the Philippines graduated in your seminary here and also in Seton Hall University, and they are here, mentioned by Father Jerry earlier. I am deeply humbled and privileged for this rare opportunity to share about Asian Christianity and Catholicism as it is seen in historiography and as it exists today. My talk will have 4 parts. I don't know if the one on Zoom can see the PowerPoint, but I'll let them. I would like to start with 2 lost narratives to show how old Christianity is, actually as old as Western Christianity from Rome. Second, I would like to describe the main directions of Western historiographies of Christianity and what challenge does this have and pose to us today. Third, I will show the present demographics of Asian Christianity and what issues this brings about. And fourthly, I will explore on the hopes and challenges of the Asian churches in our time, hoping that they speak to the issues and problems also of the American churches. Let's go to the lost narratives. I would like to refer you to an old map used by Philip Jenkins in his book, The Lost History of Christianity. This medieval map, which Jenkins called a threefold world, has its center in Jerusalem with Europe to the west, Africa to the south, and Asia to the east. In those first centuries, Christianity equally went into threefold directions: west, south, and east. But Christian historiography decided to highlight the west, a little bit of the south. In Africa, for instance, with Augustine and the drama that he had with Pelagius. But the east was obliterated after some time, since they all became, well, we call them heretics, Nestorians, Monophysites, Orthodox, Schismatics, and in our century, almost totally annihilated from the screens of our Christian consciousness. Jenkins is right. Asian Christianity, even if it was vibrant then, has become a lost Christianity. Let me illustrate this point with 2 lost narratives. I do not know if you have heard about Saint Adai of Edessa. Unknown to us in Western Christianity, he is honored in many Eastern churches, the Assyrian Church of the East, the Chaldean Catholic Church, the Syro-Malabar and Syro-Malankara Rites of India. Adai, or the Latin name is Thaddeus, was born in Edessa, which is the present-day Urfa, Turkey. He came to Jerusalem and became a follower of Jesus. He is said to be one of the 70 disciples that Jesus sent in the Gospel of St. Luke. After the Pentecost, he went to Mesopotamia, Syria, Persia, and Beirut. Some historians consider the figure legendary, but the early church historian Eusebius wrote about him, and I quote, Thomas, one of the apostles, under the divine impulse, sent Thaddeus or Adai, who was also numbered among 70 disciples of Christ. He sent him to Edessa as preacher and evangelist of the teaching of Christ, unquote. He is said to have healed and converted Akbar. Akbar is the king of Edessa, making Edessa the first Christian kingdom outside the Roman Empire. But what makes Adai significant is his contribution to liturgy, for the liturgists among us here. One of the most ancient liturgical traditions currently used in Oriental churches is the divine liturgy of Adai and Mary. It's a set of Eucharistic prayers which originated in Edessa to as early as 200 AD and attributed to Adai and his disciple named Marie. One interesting feature of this anaphora is the absence of the words of institutions, like take this, all of you, and eat it, which is common to Western liturgies. In 2001, the Holy See considered this Eucharistic prayer valid since it dates back to the early church, of course, but of course also to the indignation of the liturgical police. Beyond liturgy, my interest in Aday and his disciple Marie, Agay and Marie, was the extent of their missionary project. Aday brought the gospel to Edessa as early as 150 AD. From Edessa, Aday went to as far as Nisibis and Arabia. His disciple, Agay, went to the whole of Persia, Babylon, up to the Caspian Sea, which is the problem, which is the location of the Ukrainian-Russian problem at the moment. Some missiles are fired from the Caspian Sea. In the book of the Laws of Countries, that's around 196 AD, the oldest document in the Syriac literature relating to Christianity, it is written that by this time, there were already Christians living to the east of Bactria, presently northern Afghanistan, which, as we know, is only in the north of India and Pakistan. Then you are already talking about Far Asia. Bardaizan, writing about 196 AD, speaks of Christians throughout Media, Parthia, and Bactria, which is modern-day Afghanistan. And according to Tertullian, there were already a number of bishoprics within the Persian Empire by 220 AD. Now, it is surprising to know that Christianity has already spread to as far as Afghanistan more than a century earlier, when Constantine made Christianity an official religion of the Roman Empire in 313 AD, a century earlier. Another interesting guy is by the name of Tatian the Assyrian. Tatian the Assyrian lived around 110 AD. This guy's name is more familiar to those of us who did biblical studies. His significance to the Asian churches, however, has not been emphasized. You must have heard of the Diatessaron, a kind of harmonized gospel and a combination of materials from the Synoptics and the Gospels of John. This was composed by Tatian, who comes from Arbela, which is the present-day Arbil or Erbil in northern Iraq. When the ISIS bombed Iraq in 2014, Christians were fleeing from this ancient city. Tatian was a Bible scholar and linguist from Rome and studied under St. Justin the Martyr in 150 AD. And as we well know, it was only in the Synod of Carthage, which is 397 AD, that the canon of the scriptures became more or less official and looks like what we have today. But in the churches of the East, apocryphal gospels or acts were accepted, and some other texts like the Revelation or the letters of Peter and John were actually not accepted. And this is the situation when Tatian came back to Arbela from Rome. He translated the 4 Greek Gospels into Syriac in his own harmonized format, the Diatessaron. But my interest with Tatian is beyond Bible. 3 things make Tatian significant to my topic. First, his Syriac translation of the Bible causes the faster spread of Christianity in the Asian Middle East, whose lingua franca and liturgical language was Syriac, and East Syriac until today, which spreads to as far as India in the Syro-Malabar and Malankara rites. Second, Tassian is self-consciously Asian. Enculturation is not a new thing. It was a theological category in the early church. He reproached in his book against the Greeks. He wrote, "I am Assyrian. I am Asian." He reproached the Greeks for their pride, while in fact it is the Asians, which at that time also means non-Greeks, who were much ahead than the Greeks. In every way, he says, the East excels, and most of all in its religion, the Christian religion, which also comes from Asia. So you see, that consciousness is already there. That religion comes from Asia, and which is far older and truer than the philosophies of crude religious myths of the Greeks. Third, Tassian's theological ideas was associated in some way with a monastic group called the Incratites, who according to Saint Jerome and his Western friends were heretics. Of course, you have to understand it with a grain of salt if it comes from your opponent. But what is significant is the Christian ascetic monasticism started in Syria with Tassian and the Incratites, not in Egypt with Saint Anthony. The classical founder of monasticism only began his desert movement in 270 AD. Tassian already died a century earlier, and the ascetic movement has already spread Christianity in the East by then. Saint Benedict, the founder of Western monasticism, only started in Monte Cassino in 520 AD. That was almost 4 centuries after Tassian. And unlike Western monasticism, which tended to equate monasticism as withdrawal from the world by living in caves or in their monastic cells, the Syrian ascetics was always missionary. One writer calls them the homeless followers of the homeless Jesus on ceaseless pilgrimage throughout the world. These two narratives only show that a vigorous Christian movement was very active in the East, more or less at the same period as it was in the West. But this Eastern direction did not make it to the dominant story of Christianity. This is why today, when Christianity had declined from the West and made its global resurgence in the South and in the East, it is said to have only returned to its original location. Which brings me to my next point. I would like to trace the dominant Western story and what challenges does this pose to our whole view of Christianity. The historian Hilaire Belloc writes, "The faith is Europe and Europe is the faith. The church is Europe and Europe is the church." Most of us were taught and got used to the Western trajectory as shown in this map on screen. That Christianity traveled from Palestine to Rome and the whole of Europe. Only in the 15th century, during the time of the colonial expansion, that it traveled to the rest of the world. This is actually the Lucan trajectory, exemplified in the Acts of the Apostles. This dominant view takes as its original founding experience Paul's mission to the Gentiles in the Acts of the Apostles, where the good news came from Palestine, traveled to the west with him to Rome, and later across Europe to the rest of the world. Latin America, Asia, Africa were considered latecomers and passive recipients of European missionary expansion in the 15th century. A cursory review of the history books, church history books, would reveal this Eurocentric direction. The church history is sometimes divided into 4 parts. The first is Christian antiquity, which is Jewish. The second is the Church of the Middle Ages, which is Europe. The third is Church of the Modern Age, which still is Europe. And colonial Christianity, which begins to expand from Americas, Africa, and Asia. Even Karaner, I think, has also used the same category from Jewish to Europe to the world. So much so that in one of his famous articles now, he said that Vatican II is the first expression of the world church, following the same trajectory. But this ecclesiological direction was still unilinear movement from the West to the other continents, that is Latin America, Africa, and Asia. During the past decades, however, new historiographical trends emerged to counter this dominant paradigm. For instance, with the growing literature on global Christianities. You can Google global Christianities, and almost each university would have a department of global universities. And this describes Christianity in Africa, in Latin America, and Asia. There are also other authors who intends to foreground not only the present developments, but also aims to recover the hidden and forgotten first moments of Asian Christianity, the Christianity of the East. This group of authors argue that Europe, which many think as the origin and center of global Christianity, in fact, came very late. Philip Jenkins, for instance, claims that even beyond the first millennium, Christianity was stronger in Asia and North Africa than in Europe. Early Christian missionaries traveled by land to the famous Silk Road, which you see in the map, and by the sea, and reached as far as the east, China, Mongolia, and Japan, to as far south as India and Southeast Asia. This is one proof of it. This is called the Xi'an Stele, or the Xi'an Monument, which is a Nestorian tablet, which is erected in 781 to commemorate 150 years of the presence of Christianity in China. The arrival of Alupen, the first Christian missionary. That means in 531 or thereabouts, Christianity has surely reached and spread in the Chinese mainland. Thus, during the first millennium, there existed diverse yet mature and vibrant expressions of the same Christianity in all the central cultures of the ancient world: Mediterranean, Persian, Roman, Chinese, Indian, Armenian, Arabian, African, etc. Going back to the map that I have shown earlier, Christianity was a tricontinental religion: Asian, European, and African, almost of equal representation among each other, until the 14th century, when the Church of the East was almost totally annihilated through some external forces, like violent rulers, persecution, and other demographic factors. To quote Jenkins in text, only after about 1400 did Europe and Europeanized North America decisively become a Christian heartland. Thus, Christianity only came to be considered European by default. Europe was the continent where it was not destroyed. Matters could easily have developed differently. Let me go from the past to the present. What is the present demographics of Asian Christianity? At this point, let me now focus on the present features. Of the 7.6 billion people in the world, there are 2.19 billion Christians. Among the Christian population, there are 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide as of the latest report. The remaining number is divided into Orthodox, Protestants, Evangelicals, and others. One of the countries with the highest Catholic population is located in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, only next to Brazil and Mexico in terms of the number of Christians. The ranking has not significantly changed since 2010. But according to the Pew Research Center, Christianity seems to have the highest followers among the world religions, higher than Islam and the rest. But if you look at the bigger picture, Christianity ranks lowest in Asia. In fact, it is the minority religion in Asia except Philippines and East Timor. It remains as a minority religion since the survey in 1910 to the survey in 2010, 2012. There is no significant increase of Catholics in these countries. These demographic features of Asian Christianity can yield three sets of relationships with other religions. Number one is Christianity or Catholicism as a minority religion vis-a-vis other religions. A minority status vis-a-vis communist regimes, which is officially atheistic, and which is also in at least two countries are predominantly Catholic communities. What does this demographic tell us? First, the minority position. What are the effects of Christianity's minority position? Like all minorities, religious minorities suffer inequality and oppression. The picture that you see is a Catholic church burned in Orissa, North India in 2008 because of the Hindu persecution. Some of our converts and sisters suffered in that persecution, the Hinduization of the Indian country. But that's just one. I think Christian minorities experience violence and discrimination if the state adopts one official dominant religion. For instance, in Myanmar, if it adopts Buddhism, the Muslim, Rohingyas, but also the Christians are discriminated against. The Christianity's minority position in Asia engenders two understandable reactions. So if you're a minority, there are two problems. Number one, on the one hand, threatened with violence and discrimination, there is a tendency for Christians to aggressively assert one's religious conviction, which makes dialogue difficult. On the other hand, because of fear and anxiety of being a minority, Christians isolate themselves into their own enclaves for protection. And in both cases, dialogue is hardly a default action. Another is Christianity in communist regimes. What do Christians experience in communist and dictatorial regimes? First, Christianity in these countries is so insignificant, at least in formal records. Second, the main issue in the government is the rejection of foreign influence in its own religious affairs. And China, for instance, is one case. Intrusion by the Vatican is a difficult issue in the Chinese church. I am helping form priests, diocesan priests in China, because there are no religious priests, even if we have underground Vincentian priests. And when I first came to China, they were already tracking my emails. And they know where I'm going. They know that I'm priest. So when I went out for dinner, I went back to my hotel, and there were like 10 policemen inside my room. It's not outside, it's inside my room. And they said, "So you're Pilario?" I said, "Yes, sir. Can you sit down for an hour? We will ask you questions." And those questions, one of them was, "What do you think about the relationship between the Vatican and China?" So I have to tell lies. I don't know if you call it white lies or black lies or brown lies, but I constructive lies. But I have to say, no, I'm a tourist here. I just want to see the Chinese culture. I like your shrines or whatever. But actually, I was trying to give lectures to the Chinese clergy who actually wanted this formation. This is happening in China. This is also happening in Laos, that they have to ask permission every time they have a big event, like an ordination. And without the permission from the government, you cannot have that ordination. Your priest would not be ordained. And they can cancel it even the day before, when all the preparations are done. This is one problem with Christians in the communist regimes. I think there are more stories about this, but let's continue. How about Christians in predominant Catholic countries? What are the issues in these places? Both East Timor and the Philippines display an ambivalent relationship with the state. In these countries, the church role is resistance. For instance, in Duterte, I think you have heard our famous president, infamous president, who has been killing people left and right because they're drug addicts or because they're communists. And at the moment, there are already 33,000 killed, which landed him in the International Criminal Court. The church's position is resistance. And because the church is the only big institution that can go against him, the others are silenced. But being a threat to political power, it's also an easy target to any regime's violence by silencing dissent, red baiting. We call it red tagging, but in US it's red baiting. They're all communists, the priests and sisters, or imprisonment. Let me go to the present hopes and challenges of the Asian churches. What are the hopes and challenges of Christianity in Asia? In the spirit of Pope Francis' call to synodality, I would like to share some crucial hopes and challenges in the Asian churches, hoping that they can serve as mirrors, something that you can see through, to the Asian church or to the American churches, coming as they are from a different context. Let me mention 5. And these are my last slides. First is synodality and dialogue. Synodality, first of all, means dialogue. Dialogue in all levels, and it has become very famous now with Pope Francis' preparation for the next Synod of Bishops. But already in its first meeting in 1970, the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences outlines its specific character in the now famous triple dialogue. Dialogue of cultures, dialogue of ancient religions, and dialogue with the poor. Dialogue is Asia's manner of proclaiming Jesus and a key interpretive element in the understanding of Asian Christianity. Before this present concern for synodality in the Vatican, Asian churches have already pushed the theme not only within the church, but also with other Asian cultures and religions. They have long realized that they could not do it alone. To survive in the context of poverty, you have to deal and collaborate with your neighbor. It needs to be collaborative from the start, regardless of one's ethnicity, one's religion, one's gender or race. As sometimes feared by Western theologians, actually pluralism and dialogue are not a threat to the church. It is Christianity's only positive resource. For instance, God's creation, humankind, cultures, religions, and the whole of reality is plural and manifold. Therefore, theologies, liturgies, spiritualities have always been plural if we go back to the early times of Christianity. And especially now, in the context of Christianity's minority status, and also in the US, in the context of postmodern pluralism, this dialogue is the only way to exist. There is no other way. The second is decentralization and enculturation. I once was talking to a Lao bishop, and his complaint, now he is a cardinal, and his complaint was very simple. And he told me, Danny, I could not understand why Rome has to approve of the Laosian liturgy when no one among its dicastery members understand Lao at all. So how can they approve when no one actually understands? While we have already worked this out for a long time in context. This is a like simple or simplistic question, but it's real. But Pope Francis has already talked about decentralization even from the first act of his papacy when he introduced himself not as the Pope, but as the Bishop of Rome in that famous appearance first time at the St. Peter's Square. It's also in the Evangelii Gaudium, he says, it is not advisable for the Pope to take place. It's not advisable for the Pope to take the place of local bishops in the discernment of every issue which arises in their territory. Already in Evangelii Gaudium, the earliest document from Pope Francis. In Asia, Christianity is called a foreign religion because it came with the colonizer. Only when it becomes incarnate in a people and the church becomes indigenous and enculturated will people cease to call it a foreign religion. Therefore, the future of the Asian churches and for all the churches worldwide is to value and truly live the fullness of the local church, which actually means to enculturate the faith in context. This brings me to my third point, the Church of the Poor. There is a saying that Asia is a continent where small pockets of affluence exist side by side with big oceans of poverty. What does this mean? Three things. First, that the whole church needs to be in solidarity with the poor. Only when it does so will it be credible. Second, that the church and its ministers need to witness to the life of voluntary poverty. And we have, of course, maybe like everywhere in the world, a scandal of ministers, bishops, priests, clergy, and religious who live quite far from the lives of the people. And third, to place the spirituality of the poor in the center of our theologies. Only when we pray like them can they identify with a Christian message. But this is not new. In fact, this is the direction that Pope Francis wants us to go. In Evangelii Gaudium, he says something like this: I think of the steadfast faith of those mothers tending their sick children, who, though perhaps barely familiar with the articles of the creed, which they don't memorize anyway, cling to a rosary in times of difficulty. Or of all the hope poured into a candlelight in a humble home with a prayer for help from Mary. Or the gaze of the tender love directed at Christ crucified. Many Christian theologians look at this as superstition or in derogative manner, as popular Christianity or devotional piety. The challenge is the church is only credible when it places these spiritualities at the center of Christian theology. The church can only be synodal when it begins to listen, not just to give reprimands as it always does to the simple faith of the people, and puts its theology in touch with the spirituality of the poor. Fourth, prophetic church. In the context of the violence of populist regimes in Asia, you have a lot. In Myanmar, Philippines, India, Cambodia, Indonesia, all these places, I'm not yet talking about Laos, China, all these places are characterized by violent regimes. And what does this mean? Number one, there is a need to recover the prophetic dimension of the Christian faith. There is a need for the church to speak truth to power. Number two, there is a need to revisit the prophetic intuitions of the Asian religions and the resistance of indigenous communities. It's not only Christianity which is prophetic. Even Buddhism is prophetic. Even Hinduism is prophetic. I have written an article in Concilium in its latest issue, Asian Liberation Theologies Beyond Christianity. That's what we're trying to discover. And thirdly, in the spirit of the Old Testament prophets, we have to defend the poor, especially now that these same communities are under attack by the apologists of populist politics. Lastly, God in other faiths and religion. I think everyone is familiar with the story of the parable of the elephant and the 6 blind men. This is famous in all religions of Asia, from India to China. I think you know that story. This story tells us of the limits of our notions of God. But this is not only Asian, this is also Christian. Because the apophatic tradition of the mystics told us about these limits. Only that Western Christianity, or Western cataphatic Christianity, has downplayed the voices of the mystics in the whole playing out of Christian theology. So today, I think the challenge is for Christians to listen to Hinduism, Jainism, Islam, Buddhism, and other indigenous faiths. And beyond religions, listening to the wisdom of religions, nature is also a metaphor of God, the sign of God's presence, or the caress of God in Laudato Si. But Laudato Si is 2016. The FABC in 1980 already said, there is a need to discover in the universe God's very presence and to co-create with Him, making the earth more faithful. These are the 5 challenges, and let me go to the conclusion so that we have time for discussion. I would like to end with an invitation to synodality. As I said earlier, dialogue is not a new movement in the churches of Asia. It is its way of life ever since. But the Pope now invites the whole church to listen, to be synodal, and to live as an open dialogical communities. Let me end with this personal anecdote. The houses on stilts that you have seen on the picture is a group of Christian and Muslim communities in the south of the Philippines. So there are around 50 or 40 families living in that place. And on the one side, you have maybe 20 families who are Christians and 20, 25 families who are Muslims. On the one side, you have a small mosque. On the other side, you have a small chapel. And I was invited, I think twice or thrice in my life, to give formation to the Christian communities in these places. This is a very small, it's actually not an island, right? But the waters could be shallow during low tide, but could be high during high tide. So children can play during low tide on the shore. Shore, that's not shore, that's sea. But on high tide, they have to come up or they can swim. But on my first night, I was told a story. Well, they live, until now, they live a happy life. And on Christmas, it's very interesting because they have a small open space in the middle. And on Christmas, the Muslims bring food together with the Christian and greet each one Merry Christmas. And on Ramadan, the Christian families and the children would not eat snacks or food in front of their Muslim brothers in order to give deference to and respect to Muslim families. It's very, very peaceful community because they have to live together. They have to survive together. They have to defend each other together. Until one day, a Muslim called Mubalig came. A Mubalig is like an Islamic missionary trained from somewhere in the Middle East, and he's doing mission in this place. And his first message was that only the Muslims would go to heaven and the Christians are going to hell. And the Christians who told me when I arrived that night said, "You know what they did to that Muslim missionary, Father?" I said, "What?" They sent him out of this island the next day. I don't know if they brought him with a boat or he made him swim. And when I was looking at the next island, it's Borneo of Indonesia. That's very far. But when I was sleeping that night, I asked myself the question, why did the Christians tell me this on my first night? And I thought to myself, maybe the Christians would like to tell me, if you do the same, Father, you will land in that island. My point is simple. The local Muslims themselves, maybe it's their way of saying that if you do as a Christian missionary, if you don't foster dialogue, then there's no way for us to survive. We have actually survived all these years. It's only people on top who make life difficult for us. This is to say, as I end this talk, that dialogue is our only way. Not only in Asia, but for the whole church. And the sense of faith, what you call in Latin the sensus fidei of the poor, Muslims or Christians, tell us that this is the only way to go. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Father Danny. And this is exactly actually the theology of Pope Francis, because when you were talking, I'm thinking, Pope Francis, all his papacy is kind of based on the theology of the peripheries, if you will. So learning so much from the peripheries, from the margins of the church, from those, priests that work, with people like what you were showing us. And on the other hand, we live in a society that we can say dialogue or death, right? We can go that far, saying with and as a Catholic university, the mission of our university is based on dialogue, because of course you need to establish that dialogue with the students in order to impart, or to speak to them about faith or about literature or history, etc. So it's all based on dialogue, and that's the way the education has been since the Middle Ages, since the first universities. So thank you very much, Father Danny. I have a lot of questions for you, but first, we'll open the dialogue with with the people that we have present, and then I'll take some questions, from the audience. A lot of people are following us, on Zoom. Yes, Professor Andrea Bartoli. He is a professor at the University Core. So yes, Andrea, do you want to come here?
Thank you. Wonderful lectures. Thank you very much. It's definitely, I'm also a member of the community of Sant'Egidio. I follow Christianity in Asia in a direct way in many ways. But my question is actually more connected to Seton Hall and Nostra Aetate, because there is clearly a reorientation that is made possible by Vatican II. The church that is able to dialogue, the churches that is able to engage this way, is a church that thinks itself in a different light from the spirit coming out of Vatican II. And I was wondering if you could comment on the importance of that threshold in understanding of the church in this moving forward.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, what we say dialogue or what we say synodality now is actually coming out of Vatican II. Well, Gaudium et Spes is church dialogue with the world. Nostra Aetate is church dialogue with Jewish religions and other religions for that matter. So it's not understandable to me if Christianity at this time would close in on itself, would be concerned only with itself. And it's precisely, I think, this sickness of the present church, a self-referential, that is critiqued very much by Pope Francis. So the direction of Pope Francis' theology to go to the world, to the peripheries, is a direction towards dialogue. It's not possible that you live in this context of multiple religions and multiple ways of thought. In Asia, it's multiple religions, but in the West, it's multiple ways of thinking. It's not possible that we insist on our own. I was once in a debate with a very famous Western theologian by the name of John Milbank. I don't know if you know him. And I asked him in a conference, I think I was still a student in Belgium, and he gave us a conference, and he was thinking about the originality of Christianity, the of Christianity, that Christianity is sufficient unto itself, etc., that it doesn't need social sciences, that it doesn't need philosophies, because these philosophies will only decenter Christianity. So I raised, in that conference, I raised a question. I said, Professor, I'm from the Philippines, and in most of our neighbors in the South, these places where I also work, we live with our next door neighbor who is Muslims. Most of them are Muslims. So how will I proclaim my faith if I only have to say that the Christian faith is a true religion, is the best religion, is the authentic religion? So I was expecting a more decent answer. And he said to me, that's your problem, not mine. So I was really, well, he's a famous theologian. He is a a great theologian, well published. But if that is how he answers in these places, he's in the next island the next day. This is precisely a Christian stance, which is the only way today. That we don't have the monopoly of the truth. Maybe not like the Middle Ages, where everything is controlled under the church. I know it's difficult. I know it's uncharted territory. But these Christians in these places tell us the way to proceed. We call it dialogue of life. We may not agree on the truths of each other's religion, but we agree on the truth of love, which should be lived in any community, Christian or otherwise. In Latin America, they have Comunidades Eclesial de Base. In Asia, we don't have basic Christian communities. We in fact have in these places basic human communities. And if we look at theology, love, compassion is what Christ came to proclaim. Not the authenticity or the truth of our doctrines.
A very good presentation, and we could spend a weekend and we wouldn't be done. We could spend eternity to discuss it until the Savior comes back. But that at least one hope that all the religion traditions, including ourselves, even though we've seen our Savior died on the cross, no other religion has that. But all of us are waiting for the final coming of the Messiah. Islam, Jew, Christian, and the other tradition, Bhagavad Gita, whatever, Buddhist. That's great, and that's great for dialogue. But now coming back to the Church of the East, I think that for the first 600 years to 1,000 years, we had a great church. It was autocephalous. Everybody was independent, but the primacy was in Rome, first among equals, and Constantinople, and we had metropolitans in the East and the West, right? And we developed that way. Even with the Arian and the Monophysia, we dealt with it. The split came in 1054, and that was a split first between the Greek and the Latins, between Constantinople and Rome. That had nothing to do with the East, but they got caught up in it. But again, Islam threatened, as you know, we have to work for peace now, of course, but we have to also remember our history, that Islam threatened Christianity. All that Christianity was moving towards India, and Buddhism and Hinduism are pacifist in nature. And I think we would have had a great society, we would have moved all across, but Islam threw that curveball. You know, it came, all the other religions are before Christ, so we could say everything prefigures Christ, from the pagan, everything. Apollo is Christ, whatever, any religion you look to, it all goes automatically towards Christ. But that Islam came 600 years later, and it was sort of a throwback to the Old Testament. You know, they made Christ a prophet, they understand Miriam and all that, but they didn't take the cross, and that caused, you know, now 1,500 years of trouble. You know, and is dialogue the only way, or how do we reconcile with the history of what happened in the East?
Thank you very much for that that comment on actually the tendency of violence in religions. There is a whole library of violence coming directly from religion, intrinsic to religion or extrinsic to religion, etc. My comment on that is this: I think violence does not directly come from religion. Violence directly comes when religion takes on power. So, for instance, the Christian religion is the most peaceful religion. We know, Sermon on the Mount, etc. But it can take on power and become violent, as given to us by the Crusades. Hindu religion is the most peaceful religion. There is peace in Hinduism. But the way it is done now in India, because it has taken on power, you get churches burned. Buddhism, of all religions, Buddhism could not even kill a life. But when it takes on power, dominant power in Myanmar, pushes Rohingyas out to the sea, killing them. The same thing with Islam. My main point is simple. Once religion allies itself with power, it forgets its origin in the poor man of Nazareth, who actually has nothing, who actually had no power at all. That should be, I think, the power of religion. And then it refuses violence as its way of life. Let me go back to this. There's no dominant, minority, because they're more or less equal. They respect each other's religion. Only when that missionary came did they begin to look at the other with suspicion. So when the Christians knew I was coming, they told me, Father, well, they did not say it. They are kind not to say it to the priest. But if they were saying, Father, on the ground, we have each other's compassion. But if you want to impose the truth and the power of your truth, then we're in a violent situation. I think that's how I look at it.
Right, other than with the foreign element, that comes and brings, wants to transport, let's say, or bring Western ideals or whatever to this local situation. Always find a local solution. That would be your. But on the other hand, religion is also used, right, by politicians, because of course, everybody is so sensitive to religion, right? And when religion is used, wars, and I'm thinking of Bosnia, for example, or other places in the world that are hotspots now, or look at Ukraine, right? So even when religion is used, it causes problem and it destroys the local living dialogue, that Pope Francis has been so particular about, that kind of dialogue. So for finding solution, always look at local solutions first, right? That would be your take on this, right? Okay, other questions? Yes.
Well, I haven't thought of suggesting to you what to do with us. Uh, yeah, support. Yeah. I think the direction of the Vatican today on synodality is a support to Asia, but also to the rest of the world. Actually, the Synod on Synodality and what it's doing now, to listen to each one, the differences and the positive resources, is the way to go. If there is a point, what I was saying is that this is the only way to go, because people in Asia already said that and lived that for a long time. Now, what does Rome or churches from here can do is to live that life of synodality, is to live that same life. And then We don't impose to others like what Professor Morsako here says. The instrumentalization of religion is an instrumentalization of power. And there can be religious power that can be imposed from other sides of the world. I think that this is, for me, a help to Asia, but also a help to the rest of the world. There would be other resources like, for instance, dialogue with China. I think the Vatican is doing a lot on dialogue with China, and even Pope Benedict and Pope Francis does not, in the Chinese context, does not even like go head on into the Chinese issue. Even that approach is dialogical. It's the same thing with what the Vatican is doing in Vietnam. There is no such, of course, Vietnam, you have problems of asking permissions, of the church being controlled by the government because it's communist. But even that stance is not a head-on and direct confrontation with power. So I think if there is anything that the Church of Asia is saying, that dialogue is the only way to go. This is how Asia helps the Western Church. But if the Western Church continues with it and fosters it, this is how we also live and help Asia. Thank you.
Oh, I completely agree, Father, and I'm sure that you saw the Via Crucis in the Colosseum, and Pope Francis, without saying any word, nothing, put two women, one Russian, one Ukrainian, under the cross, and this caused a lot of animosity, I can say, especially among the Ukrainians, that why these two women are under the cross together in the Via Crucis. But this is the dialogue of signs and images, putting just in front page that humanity, that Father, you talked about that, right? And these two women are friends, they are close friends. They both work in an Italian hospital. And now, because of the war, does this mean that these two women are going to fight with each other? No. Pope Francis put them under the cross. Extremely significant, I think, if you think about the situation that is in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia today. So even the dialogue means a lot. He opened the door, but it's a dialogue of signs, right? Under the cross, under the sufferings of the cross. Yes. Other questions?
I would follow up, except we might not have to go before remote. So in terms of
Synodality.
The recent bishops, American bishops, wrote a letter threatening like there's going to be a schism because of dialogue and having
Okay. First of all, I'm only 9 months in the United States, and I don't quite understand the politics of the U.S. Hierarchy. I think the other priests who are here can help me answer that. But we know that even dialogue today has been politicized. I'm afraid that is also happening in the culture wars and other issues. If in our context, the dialogue is also politicized by that missionary who just came, I think in other places, that can also be the danger. So people refuse dialogue not because they don't want to talk, but because their power has not been recognized or their power has been threatened. In sociology, their hegemonic control is threatened. I don't know, maybe the other priests or the other professors who are here would know more. I don't like to comment on it because I do not quite know the intricacy of that difficulty.
Anyone wants to comment about the, the synodal way that the German church is?
I think, you know what the best example here is, and people on Zoom and wherever, whoever's listening is, we should go back to the original thing, to see the poverty, see Christ in other people. And let's get rid of all that periphery. What are you wasting time with that? People are dying, people are poor. That's economic and social justice come first. We have a war in Ukraine, wars in Myanmar, people killing, murdering. And here we're worried about all this periphery stuff. Let's concentrate on the poor. Let's see Christ in our poor brothers and sisters. That's the greatest thing you said today. Thank you.
Yes, any other questions before we take some questions from the audience? Jason, you teach global Christianity, and I'm sure you know Asian Christianities are part of your course. If you can tell us anything about the students, you know, how they take this. Because of course, you know, when you teach, I'm an ecclesiastical historian, history of Christianity. It's not one of those courses, you know, that the students like to take, right? You always have to make Christianity very current and very relevant. I always start, you know, with stories, what is happening in the Catholic Church today, to get their attention and bring them to the actuality of our faith. And then you can bring, you know, the theological notions and also the history, you know, to them. And so that for these kids, you know, millennials and Generation Z and whatnot, you know, history comes alive, theology comes alive. Theology, you know, it's not only bones, but it's also flesh, you know, and so that's the way that I go when I teach these courses. And Jason, if you want to share anything, you know, Jason is a professor in the Department of the Core, and he also teaches for Catholic Studies, and it's the course that he's teaching next semester. I think it's Global Christianity. Oh, you're teaching it right now, okay? And next semester too. Yes.
Sure. I very much appreciated the talk, and I hope that a lot of my students were able to listen online. It would have been a very nice review for much of them. We talked about Jenkins and that map I showed in my class too, and the three lobes, and the whole Nestorian controversy, and we talked about Alopen and the rock in China and Syriac Christianity. We look at we talk a little bit about Brother Mike Velarde in the Philippines, and so a lot of what you said I think was really very good, and the focus on the poor and charismatic leaders. I guess if I had to ask you a question, the one I would ask is, I'm wondering, as we were talking about dialogue, what you would say about the relationship between Catholicism and Protestantism in many Asian countries. And of course, in Philippines, there's probably not a lot of Protestants, but I'm thinking maybe some other countries, Korea or Vietnam or Japan. How is the dialogue between Catholics and Protestants going in a lot of these Asian countries?
I have been teaching in Korea for some time, like for 3 months at least. And one of course, my students were Catholic students and seminarians. One of the questions that I wanted them to explore is said, so how many Protestant friends do you have? And to my surprise, none of them, or at least maybe majority of them, does not have a Protestant friend. I was asking the question, why? And then I come back to what I said earlier. A minority status doesn't encourage dialogue. It's not a default reaction to dialogue if you are a minority. So each one is an enclave into itself to protect its own identity. But it's different when you're in the Philippines. In the Philippines, in the movements of resistance at the moment, part of the resistance movement of Duterte, we all collaborate we have a Protestant pastor. We have she is a lady, and we have an evangelical pastor, charismatic, with a small church that he has in the area where we work, and we collaborate even during the pandemic. So the pastors like met during the pandemic, and we divided the area onto ourselves and said, can you take care of that area and do resource work for that area? We will take care of this area and we will solicit funds for this area. And we continue to collaborate. And for me, that is a very, very happy ecumenical movement, even during the pandemic. But different parts of Asia, there are different reactions depending on the situation. Thank you.
Yes, of course, of course, of course.
Because we have another class also joining online. That is a class on Christian peace stories. And one of the peace stories, Christian peace stories that I share with the class is actually of a Syriac bishop, Mar Gregorius Ibrahim, who participated in many of the initiative of interreligious dialogue, started with John Paul II in Assisi in 86. And of course, there is also Syriac presence here in New Jersey. So just to say that the Syriac, in particular, the Syriac experience, Christianity, is still around and still alive and very significant in many ways. So I want to share this word just because he was kidnapped during the war in Syria, disappeared, probably killed by fighters, Muslim fighters, extremists, and but just to say that there is a Christianity that has been in dialogue with history for a long time, and that it's important for us to recognize this goodness, this faithfulness to the gospel in churches of this kind.
Thank you for bringing that up. And we know that Syriac Christianity is not dominant. As I said, it's most of it is you can find in Syria and India and Syrian rites. But it's good that we bring them and their voices out again. Because one of the temptations of the dominant Christianity is to marginalize the minorities. And Syriac Christianity is a minority. But to bring their voices again and how they have dialogued with history and moved towards peace is a good resource also for Christians, for Catholic Christianity. Thank you.
And also the Catholic University can do a lot to expose students to this Christianities, right? Syriac Christianity or, Indian Christianities, etc. So because I did my, studies in Rome, and even in Rome, you had to go to the Pontifical Oriental Institute of the Gregorian University in order to get an education on lesser Christianities, if you will, right? So, and even at Oxford or Louvain, Father, it's not that we study Christianity in all its varieties. It's a very, European-centered Christianity. So it starts with education, I think. Education plays a great role. So thank you, Jason, for offering that course for us. One of the questions that came from the audience, Father, is China. And of course, it's very controversial, and many people are critical why the Vatican, is flirting with China, as one of those put it. So, what's your take on that? Because we know from the news that came from China that Christianity is persecuted, in China. Does this make a case for the church, or it's kind of damaging Christianity in China?
Thank you very much. China is one big continent, maybe bigger than United States. And it's quite complex and difficult to like summarize an answer in 5 minutes or so. But this is one thing that I can say. If you want to continue with the underground church and the patriotic church and its binary, that might exist in the mind, but it does not exist in the ordinary lives of people. I have a lot, well, the priests that I am helping form are patriotic church. I know of some Vincentians who belong to the underground church. But in ordinary discussions and meetings, they all gather together. They are all priests without that distinction. Of course, maybe their prejudices are still there, but they, in one way or the other, are one in their love for the church. So I'm expecting when I have a lecture with the patriotic priests, I'm expecting that I should not say anything against the Chinese government. And so which means that I have to keep quiet about it. But in the discussions, it is them who brings out the problems of the Chinese government. So they in fact are critical with what's going on, even if they belong to the patriotic church. And since I'm in my theological discourse, I'm a little bit critical of the Vatican. They love the Vatican more than me. So, but this belongs to the patriotic church. My point is simple. If you live life on the ground in China, that distinction does not actually matter. So is the Pope flirting? I don't think that's the right word. I think the Pope understands what's going on because I talk to this priest and this priest will tell me, if you go underground and directly oppose the communist regime, you will not live a Christian life at all. Because you will forever be hiding or you will be pursued by forces of the state. So the way that we want, because we want to live the Christian life, it doesn't really matter whether we're patriotic or underground. I think what is important is that we live that Christian life on the ground. So again, my point is very simple. The distinctions lie in people from above. The distinctions lie on the authenticity of doctrine or obedience to the Pope in the minds of theologians and the people who have know-how. But on the ground, like it is in these islands, life has to go on. Christian life included.
I'll take this last question. One of is about what's your stance about Patriarch Kirill of Moscow not going against, the Russian aggression in Ukraine?
I think that is what I refer to as the prophetic church. Wherever we are, in the context of violence, we have to stand up and be a prophet. Like the prophets of the Old Testament, who actually stood up to the kings. That's the challenge of Christianity. Asia, in Russia, or the rest of the world. I am happy that the Church of Russia stood up to Putin. Thank you.
So much, Father Denny. We are very grateful for your lecture and also for your time and your visit here. And I hope that you can visit us again. You have an open invitation, actually. So please, Father, come. And these are all, topics that we are extremely interested, to know more about. And also your focus on dialogue and synodality. It's extremely important for our Catholic University and our students. Thank you very much, everybody.